Hi, this is Andrea. I'm going to be watching the Equal Money video made by Bernard Poolman called The Fabric of Society. As I watch the video, I'm going to be pausing it and at certain parts giving my perspective and my own life experiences in relation to what he is discussing, which will be based on, as I listen to the interview, I'm going to be observing what he is saying, and within this I will use my own life experiences, my own observations throughout my life, and through this we'll be able to share what I've observed, we'll be able to share my insights into what he is communicating, and I suggest you do the same. If you're listening to this interview, wherever I pause and I give my perspective, you do the same. Just do a quick overview of how you have observed the world in relation to the point that we're communicating about. What is your insight? What is your perspectives? Do you have any suggestions? So I'm going to be starting this video now, and I will be pausing at the specific points where I am going to give my insight. Thank you very much. Let's begin.
Equal money. Continue. The fabric of society. Let's investigate the fabric of society, and you'll notice that the fabric of society can be likened to a multidimensional, layered creation that stretches over generations. Vested in it is not only the genes of those that constructed, built, or participated in the making of this fabric of our system, our society, but within it is money. Money in many different ways. Some got rich out of it, some got poor, some lived well, some died, some suffered, some had happiness. And all the participants had a secret. The more money they had, the greater the secret. It's like an interesting thing, because those with money will say that money is good because now they can help the less fortunate. So those that do not have a fortune.
So in this first section where he speaks about the multidimensionality and the layers of creation, I'm going to be speaking about this, because if you look at what is referred to as the fabric of society. So if society is like a piece of material, right? That piece of material, even though it's a thin layer, look at everything that went into that. Look at everything that went into making the fabric of something. You have layers and layers and layers of fibers being placed together, which eventually make up the strands, which eventually makes up the strands of cotton or whatever material made of, and that is then sewed together and placed together by machinery in very finely compressed layers until you have a very sturdy piece of material, a piece of fabric. And our society functions exactly the same way. If you look at the individual throughout time, meaning if you go back 100 years, each and every single person who you are now and what society is now is made up of layers. And let's now talk about these layers, right? So as he mentions in his interview, he speaks about all the layers that made up who we are now. This would be our genetics. This would be as a child is born, he has the genetics from the mother, father, and from the generations before them, but also what comes into play there is the influence of the parents and society on the child. So that will then become the child through what the child accepts themselves to be, and that then gets infused and becomes your entire physicality, your mind, your behaviors, and all of that then becomes your DNA. So you then pass that on when you find a mate, and you have a child. Your DNA infused with the generations before you and everything that you were in your lifetime is then put together with the DNA of your mate, and you will then have a child. And so the generations are created through layers and layers of information that is placed together to create the next human. But let's actually break this down and go and look at what are these layers made of. If you go and look at every single experience that we've ever had over the last how many thousands of years, since the beginning when man stood up and started using his brain and started moving his body and started focusing on eating, drinking, keeping himself safe, surviving, being able to hunt, being able to gather, then having people live with him, being able to have children, all of those layers which produced an outcome would result in the being having to survive even more. So if you look at, for example, the Industrial Revolution and all of those eras that came about, every single era within man's history resulted in us having to adapt more and more to the society that we were creating. So what were the societies that we were creating? What was the fabric of what we gave value to? Throughout time, if you follow history of mankind, you will see that we started giving more and more value to having, and to be able to have that which we enjoyed, not just the simple things like food and water and shelter, but collecting things which you enjoyed collecting. So first of all, man started out with having to just survive. So man would adapt his thinking, he would adapt his behavior and the physicality to be able to go out there to hunt, to survive, and to fight if necessary. And every single human started doing the same thing, having to do the same thing. If you wanted to survive, you had to fight and you had to adapt yourself and your thinking and your environment even to be able to take care of yourself and your family. Then as man became more, started developing things and houses and cities and every time we created more and more things for us to participate in, we had to adapt ourselves more and more to be able to get that which we wanted. So what we would do is we would then, through each generation, so now realize through each generation, as we're becoming more clever in how we're having to survive and how we're having to get things. For example, when you look at the era where they started working with trade, I have food and I want what you have, so let us trade. So value was given to, for example, food, and a certain amount of value was given to, for example, water, and those who had food would trade with those who went to fetch water, and that is how they would coexist within a community, within a tribe. But what was happening is that, and if you observe this throughout history, something very interesting came in, which was called consumerism. And consumerism was basically that the more man realized he could create things with his hands, the more we built and we created clothing, and the clothing became more fancy, and our houses became more exotic, and you then go into the era of man becoming more fine-tuned, if you want to call it that. And therefore the concept of I can have more and I can have more than the next person became more prominent within the human's mind. And this opened up a very interesting experience within the human, which was completely then focused on gaining money, greed, having more than the next person. So the human then created money, which was then used to be able to say, okay, if I want more than the next person, I'm going to have to participate in my work where I get given money so that I can buy those things. And with the creation of money, with capitalism, it opened the door even more for the human to separate ourselves into segments within society, where then you would have the rich and the poor, and you would have those who were able to participate in capitalism, meaning having businesses and making a profit, and those who had to work for those who owned businesses. So in this, there was a split between those becoming rich and those remaining poor, and this became accepted as this is human nature, is us doing what we're doing currently. Okay? In other words, this became the fabric of society, where we decided society is this cloth, it is this end product. Everything we have now already decided upon and created as the capitalist system is this outcome, and everybody at that stage was satisfied with it. I mean, if you look at the beginning of capitalism and you go through the definitions of what was defined as capitalism, it very much deals with profit, being able to own things, being able to sell, being able to make more than the next person. It was very much focused on that. And in that era, people were very satisfied with this. People were looking at it as something really, really great. At that stage, in the beginning where capitalism was founded, people did not even understand that a few hundred years down the line, the consequences of adding more layers, which I'll get to in a moment, would be astronomical, would be the absolute destruction of the planet, of nature, of each other, that the separation between rich and poor would become so vast that millions would be left to suffer, millions would be left to work in minimum earning jobs, and millions of beings would be left to just function on the breadline, not even being able to live a decent life because they've come to accept their role as the poor ones. And it was not taken into consideration that what was seen as absolutely modern and fun and a new challenge for the human, which was capitalism, would eventually, hundreds of years down the line, lead to us going down one road which, as you can see where we are now, is not going to stop, because, and this I'll get to in a moment, look at what happened from that moment forth. Layers and layers was added to what the fabric of society is defined as. So from that point on, anything was basically allowed in the name of profit, in the name of capitalism. And man's sole purpose became focused on just making money and the movement of money and personal gain, and even spirituality, if you look at it, was completely focused and directed and given a definition according to this is God's will. God gave us this planet, God gave us our mind so that we can do what we want. And the spiritual leaders then supported the entire capitalism industry by saying, if that is how it is, that is how it is. God made us as we are. Therefore, if this is what we want to create as a world, as society, as we accept everything as the money system, then so be it. And even to today, we are not considering the original starting point of ourselves from the perspective of, if I was to create a world again, would I again create the fabric of society as layers and layers of information based on, first of all, survival? I need to drink water, so I need to give that person something so I can get water. What about us going back to a starting point, for example, where we are all living on a planet where we've been equally placed here, and water and the resources have been equally placed for everybody? And if we work out a system, as we could have done right in the beginning, where everything is equal and everything is distributed equally for all life on the planet, and to have management points in place where all resources are given equally, then we can get to a point where the joy we experienced in the beginning to go, wow, if I give that guy money, I get something. I get this radio, and I enjoy this radio. But now we've come from that point of, this is so new, we're creating things with our hands, and we can trade things for it, and then we used money to trade for it, and then we went to complete separation and created what we have now, which People are still having more moments of enjoyment. I can buy something because I have money. But if you look at the layers and layers of suffering and strain that people experience to be able to have money, to be able to occasionally go, oof, I can buy myself something. And that is what we've become now as society. We've created the fabric which consists of layers and layers of information based on fear, survival, fear of not having, fear of death. If you specifically sit and you look at what the fabric of society is made of, you will see that the layers and layers of information consists of the fears of the generations before us, and everything that goes into that, meaning everything that goes into the DNA of the person, which would be his fear, your parents and your forefathers, their fears, their concerns, their anger, their personality. Everything of that goes into who you are. Then on top of that you add the money concerns, the survival concerns. So the fabric of our society consists of the fabric of each human being, that consists of the strains and the worries and the survivals of the generations before us, plus how we are trying to survive in this world and what we give value to based on the original starting point, such as we started with capitalism, based simply on I want things and I'm going to have to get more money than the next guy so that I can have these pretty things in my life. Not considering, humans have not looked at the fabric of society, considering that we can create a fabric of society that is not based on survival, that is not based on fear of not having, fear of not surviving, of not being able to feed your family. So that is my perspective on the first part with regards to the fabric of society.
So how do we fix this obvious miscreation? Because there are so many vested interests. Everyone owns a part of this society and has got their teeth into it and is not willing to let go because it's theirs. They own it. They know how to get through that part. They are protecting their children. They are protecting their families. They are protecting their countries. It all depends on what type of cultural system exists. So, practically, how will one get to a point in the world where everyone will participate, or the majority will participate and do what's best for all? Because remember, there's another little sneaky thing out there, which is what minorities use against majorities, and that majorities may not dominate minorities. Now, who's the minority in this equation in the world? The wealthy and the elite. They're the ones that's protected by this minority idea that the minority should be protected. But in democracy, real democracy, the majority rules and the minority live in fear. So it's going to be a fascinating thing.
Yes, from observing society, I have come to see that what is presented to us as a political opinion, as a political standing, as democracy, is not real democracy. You know, when you are given an option of who to vote for and what that party stands for, and you go to vote, you're not actually voting for the equal treatment of yourself and of the rest of the beings on the planet, and you're not actually voting for the best for yourself and the best for everybody else that lives here on this planet. You're voting for a party that is able to give you one or two or three aspects of a functional, what they can give you to be functional within the current world system, which is already based on rich and poor. Therefore, democracy currently in the world does not actually exist. because we're not actually looking at, I would like to vote for a world system where abusive practices are stopped in the name of greed. That currently is not an option. There is no such option as voting for, I would like to vote for a party where I can make sure that for the rest of my life, my children are provided for, and equally all humans on the planet are provided for, and that the political party must always make decisions according to what would be best for all. Now, the terminology, what is best for all, I will give a brief insight here. What is best for all means being able to feed yourself, being able to drink, having a roof over your head, being able to move around the world, being able to participate in what there is to do in this world, because you have an equal right to everybody else, and you have, by birthright, you are born into this world, therefore you get to live equally. And the concept of greed, so that a handful, the minority, may have a really, really good time, that is why we are currently in a situation where the people who do not have are convinced that it is best to be in the current world system that we are. But why are you convinced that it is best, that rich should exist and poor should exist, and that we should continue in these cycles of rich and poor, and our next generation should become the next layer of the fabric of society, because they are again accepting that maybe one day I can be the rich person? That is basically the current mindset that we've allowed. So currently, if democracy was to really exist, the actual options of what is best for humanity would be available to humans to access. But currently that is not even available, because the political parties are not at this stage interested in that, because they are protecting the money. So currently, when you're even voting and you're told it is your democratic right, the only thing that you're voting within is an already existing system based on rich and poor.
As we now move on to the next stages, and the resonant anger within grows, and the realization is slowly but surely coming through to the man on the street that unless everyone benefit, there is not going to be a happy medium, there's not going to be a society that's going to work, there's not going to be a world where everyone is taken care of. And no one has really actually even started looking at how to solve this problem. We know well that this problem is coming, because have a look. There is no more leaders in this world in the revolutions. It's now just people. There is a form of equality that is started in Egypt, Tunisia, and that has been moving. Obviously, those are the people least affected by consumerism. They are the ones that's been the poorest of the poor. And there is a danger that they can easily be appeased with very little, like most of the Western world. It's appeased with very little, living, you can virtually say, at the brink of extinction, having either a government grant or a job that pays just enough, so you don't have to take responsibility for anything. You just do your job, and then you go on with your life. You have your parties, you have your friends. I mean, that's the interesting Westerner. You don't want to have anything to do with decision making. You don't want to have anything to do with where the money come from. You don't care. You don't want that responsibility. Why is it? Because you know inside there's this anger, and you have just given up and says, I can't face this anger. And this anger I don't see only in me, I see this in everyone. It's everywhere. Let me just live out my life. It's virtually living a life of defeat. It's a form of defeatism. You can't even engage with such a person in considering what's best for all, because they are already defeated, and many of them work as your middle class.
So in this section he communicates about, your typical Westerner, and who in humanity is actually going to recognize what sort of downward spiral we're on here, and what we have accepted as a fabric of our society, and who's going to take responsibility for it. And here I would like to share my experience within the money system and how I came to a certain realization for myself. I grew up in you could basically say a Christian type family, middle class family. My father was a banker, my mom worked, and my father died when I was 11, and I grew up basically resenting the money system from the perspective of, I saw how hard my father worked, I saw how hard my mother worked, and as a youngster, I was one of 4 children. I always, children know when the parents are under pressure with regards to money. The children, they hear the parents talking, they hear the soft conversations happening in the bedroom, they see the father coming home, slamming his case down on the table, and the children pick up that there are money issues, and that not necessarily money issues from the perspective of that you've lost everything, which is a lot of families also go through, but in my experience we were always never able to have more than what we had. And my sisters all went off to university, and this placed a lot of pressure on my father and my mother to be able to pay for them. So there was always that hanging over our heads as a family. And therefore when my father died when I was 11, I realized that he had lived his entire life just providing for his family, and that the pressure of him possibly losing his job caused him to have a heart attack, and he died. So my realization was that, I was 11, so I was starting to, be able to think for myself and to start considering what was going on in my world. And what I realized was that my father had worked his entire life to be able to provide for his family, and so did my mom. And he died of a heart attack based on the biggest fear, which is that he might lose his job and not be able to continue providing for his family. So first of all, there was years and years of stress of being able to month provide effectively for his family, and then he's threatened with perhaps losing his job, which he had been in for many, many years. And at that point itself caused him to go into such stress that he will not be able to continue providing for us, that he had a heart attack and he died. And to me, that was the ultimate sort of vicious cycle that I realized then that human beings are trapped in. And since then, I started paying attention to the other families around me, families we used to socialize with, and I started observing my sisters as they finished university and they went to go and work in the system, and I started becoming aware of the smaller, subtle things which every human experiences as they go into the system and they have to work, but also those secrets that every family hold on to or have based around money and survival. The things they have to do to be able to pay their bills, not being able to pay their bills, the guilt of not being able to do this, the pressure of not being able to send their children to special universities, all those kind of secret thoughts that exist within the bubble of each family. But each family has the same money fears, and therefore it is known by every single human. If you actually, we all pretend as if we love being in the money system, but we all actually are also able to acknowledge that if you observe your family growing up, most people can relate to what I'm saying here, that there was always, or most of the time, pressure around money. There was always, every decision that the family would make would always be based around money. And this is not necessarily a big thing. Being able to choose which holiday resort you go to, I'm not saying that is a big thing. I'm talking about that constant cloud that hangs over every single human throughout our lives, where we can only make certain decisions based on the money that we have. And for some, it is not a big thing. For your middle class society, it really is not a big thing. Obviously for the rich, it's even less so. Obviously for the rich, it's a different ballgame because they have so much debt and a lifestyle to uphold that it's a different kind of stress for them. Here, and I'm here talking about the lower middle class and the lower class income brackets, where you constantly have that cloud hanging over your head, and you know that you have to send your children back into the system to be able to provide them for themselves, but you cannot even provide a decent education for that child to have to compete, and you don't even want that for your child actually, but we accept that we've had children and we have to prepare them as best we can to go and survive and fight in the system and compete with all the millions of other beings in the system. And I started becoming aware of that just by observing the other families. And as I became, 17, 18, 19, I was already observing how society was battling on all these layers that we all know exist, but we don't want to talk about. And what happened to me when I left high school was, it was in 1996. It was the year that Mandela had been, previous years had been released from prison, and now there was the ANC was in power, and there was the shift to affirmative action, which means that white people were not allowed to be given the jobs, that the black children were to be given jobs over white children. And that happened in 1996, which was the year I matriculated. So I went into the system, and wherever I applied for jobs, I was told, sorry, you're not the right skin color. And eventually, after months and months of phoning agencies, phoning businesses, responding to ads in the newspaper, I was told by my mother, you have to find work. And eventually I had to print out my CV, and I had to walk the streets in town and go from business to business saying to them, do you please have work? And I was told, sorry, there's no work, it's affirmative action. And this was the start in South Africa of where it became even more difficult now for people to find jobs. The pressure was changing from just being able to uphold a middle class lifestyle to the next generation, which was my generation, not even being able to find jobs, which meant that many families were thrown into absolute poverty. Many families that I knew of that had to move from their houses in middle and upper middle class areas to the poorer areas, where they had to go and live in caravan parks or in one bedroom houses. And obviously in relation to what had happened in the past, in relation to apartheid, it did not compare to that. I'm not saying it compared to that, but I'm saying that this was a point within the money system that was now the greed point, and the power point was again having a direct impact on the working class. I mean, here you are now. It didn't change the fact to anybody actually that Mandela had been released, for example, because look at what was happening now. There was still poverty in the majority of your black community, and now the white community had been thrown into poverty. So what was that saying to you about the money system? Nobody was being uplifted in any way through the money system because the country's economy couldn't handle that. I mean, it's one thing to say, for a political party to say, we promise jobs for everybody. That's not so. In reality, you can look at what happens in every country. There's only so many jobs available for so many people, and the jobs only pay the salaries that they do. Therefore, it might look as if everybody has a job, and therefore a country is stable, even if you look at countries like America, where they claim they are, the first world, and, they're one of the strongest countries, but actually go and look at what the working class get paid and how many people live just on the breadline. I've spoken to many American people, working class American people, who have come to stay here at the farm, and they are the ones who can give direct experiences of what it is like to actually work in the working class area in America, and what you actually get paid and what you can buy for that. And it's the same thing in every single country. So that was my experience growing up. For years I was unemployed. I would have small jobs here and there. But the point of realization that came through for me, which Bernard was referring to in the previous section, was that because I, for years, battled to find a job, I was in situations where I had to always make a plan to try and get money, to try and get somebody to help me pay my rent, somebody to give me a place to stay. And then what happened is I was taken in by Bernard and Desteni and the group here, and we all started working in the business, and I had a stable income. And I then realized, well, this is who I am. I'm sharing my experience. I then started enjoying my monthly salary and being able to go to the shop and buy clothing if I wanted to, go to a movie, go have lunch, buy myself nice treats. But the question remained, and this is who I am, which is why I asked the question, because of everything I'd observed throughout my life. I asked the question, but now wait a minute. I've just come from living all the way up to age 28, living on the breadline, under the breadline, having to do pretty compromising things to be able to survive, just like every single human that's out there. And now I'm in a position where I'm fairly comfortable, but how can I now, knowing the system that I'm still in, I mean, if this salary goes away, then I am again back at square one with everybody else. Therefore, the system exists and is not to be ignored by me. And I started realizing that what I'm enjoying now as the salary that I have, meaning a certain amount of money that I know I have that makes life livable for me on this planet, I'm very grateful for that, and I feel very comfortable. But how many other people can say that? And even though I can say that now, I'm still trapped in the money system where I'm dependent on participating in a job, for example, like every other human. And that point exists the whole time. We have a job and we fear not having the job, and we fear not being able to pay our bills. And look at what happens once you have a salary. You start buying the basic things, but the money always runs out. Therefore, towards the end of the month, you're always concerned that you're not going to be able to make the end of the month. If anything happens, your car breaks, your child gets sick, you go into anxiety, because the basic things that should be in place, from my perspective, that we've all, remember in the beginning I spoke about, we've all created things with our hands, or things have been created, and we did this as humanity, and that's great. It makes our experience on this planet really enjoyable to live here and express. But now we've gone and added values to who gets to have that and who doesn't, and we've now placed money as the value system, which will allow some to have those comforts and others not. And even some basic things are not even comforts, they're basic living requirements: food, water, shelter, basic medical care, education, being able to move from point A to point B. These are things, being able to take care of your animals. And these are things that your average family are concerned about whether they'll be able to even get that. And this is where I realized that I do not accept the current system as it is. It's one thing to say, okay, I'm comfortable now, no problem, I have a salary, but I do not accept that, because behind that I see that what really goes on and what really is expected of every single human just to survive in the system, and I do not accept that. I don't find comfort in the small things of, yeah, I've got a salary, now I can buy that, and I have this really cool new TV and that guy doesn't, ha ha ha. I don't find that joy, and to me that is not an accomplishment, because I was in the system as the person who had nothing, who some days had to eat a sandwich as my main meal for the day. And many people have that, and obviously even worse. And because I've been there and I know that there are so many in the system who currently experience that and don't have a way out, I decided that I have the ability to change the world system as who I am, as the realization that this is not acceptable, and as the realization that because I'm already living the basic comfort, the basic dignity of having food every day now, water, roof over my head, I want that for every human, for every being on this planet. I want the basic requirements taken care of, because it is our right to life. It didn't become my right because I got given a nice job. It is my right because I live and I'm alive equally with all equal resources on this planet. Therefore, I want that equal right for every single being on this planet, and I'm in a position to say I'm going to propose a new world system, not new world order. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying one group controls everybody else through some idea of comfort and riches. That's not what an equal money system is about. An equal money system is based on, let's get back to the fabric of society becoming that of everybody being able to live in this world and participate in everything equally and have your basic needs taken care of because you are born on this planet and it's your right to life. And that the world government, as a group that manages and directs these points, are not there for doing it for greed. They're there to make sure everything is in place so that everybody gets the same and everybody gets to live equally. Therefore, money becomes a system of we all get given the same amount from birth. Therefore, you use that as a credit system which you utilize throughout your entire life to be able to say, I go and I get what I need, I have it, and I live my life. That is then the fabric of society that I want to recreate so that we can stop surviving and get back to a point of actually enjoying ourselves on this planet. I mean, I can't enjoy myself if I know that there's millions starving and millions being abused in the name of the capitalist system. To me, there's no lifetime of enjoyment knowing that.
So, how do we fix this? If we have a look at it, what is the key solution to get humanity as a majority to move and actually try and actually work towards a solution that's best for all? What we already can see very clearly, those that is already walking this road, is that you can't easily do that, or you don't get anywhere with argument, you don't get anywhere with reporting. You can share, you can do whatever you want, unless you get to the person at a dimension where their life has taken them through all the layers and proven that there is a problem. They can't hear you. Now that would mean normally that your life in essence has turned out in a ball of shit. It's gone nowhere. There has been nothing significant. Nothing significant has happened. Many of your dreams, your hopes and so on is evaporated or destroyed. And in spite of all the effort you put in, you've got nowhere. Those are the ones that will easiest hear what we have to share. So, if that is the way people must be before they can hear, then obviously something must happen in this world that's push people over the edge, that they realize that there is a need, a requirement for humanity to bring about a world that is best for all. We have to identify within this the major groups that obviously are the difficult ones, because we have a multi-fabricated, remember, It's not a multi-fabric society. It's a multi-fabricated society. It's all fabricated. It's not real. It exists within the mind as a fabrication. It's made up through generations, and with each one creating their own idea of God, their own idea of prayer, religion, following, morality, all a multi-fabricated society system that is functioning. And only once the total fabric of it collapses do someone start to question. The other problem is that in the design, this fabric was taking on the design of infinity. That means it looks like it will go on forever. And all you have to do is participate, do your best, because eventually, in one of your future lives, and many don't even believe in future lives, but they have that hope. In one of your future lives, you are going to win, and it's all going to work out. There is some higher force, God, being, life, something that is going to make sure that you eventually win. All you have to do is try. And then in that projection, the groups that follow this later thing, this hereafter solution point, they are unwilling to hear about anything in terms of changing the world, because to them, the world is an illusion. Everything that happens, this pain, it's all an illusion, because it all goes away when you die. Obviously, they have no certainty about what happens after death, but that is rather irrelevant from their fabricated reality that they've constructed in the mind as themselves and those that interact with them. So those kind of situations is also going to have to be addressed. And as we progress in our process of establishing what it is we're going to have to do, we're going to have to look at all the various difficulties we're going to have to face in this multi-fabricated system, society, world. Identifying the groups that will do everything in their power to stop us, simply because they want their fabrication to become true, regardless, without even realizing what it will actually mean for the rest of the world or all other living beings. They simply don't care. It is completely self-interested.
So with regards to my own experience of turning towards spirituality and a higher meaning, what I did was, after I left school and I was starting to show interest in the occult and the paranormal, I started reading books, and I had a great fascination with ghosts and possession and stuff like that. And then I started reading books about healing, all kinds of forms of alternative therapies. And I decided that if I have sufficient funds one day, I'll study to become a kinesiologist, which at some stage I did. And basically what I did is I was looking for, I had found a job. As I explained, after years of not being able to find a job, I eventually found a job because I had studied horsemanship. I found a job managing a horse farm. So this was kind of my realization that, well, I'm in the system now. I finally found a job. I'm not very satisfied with the outcome, meaning I'm now just another one of the working class people, working from morning till 6 o'clock at night, earning a sort of a very low paying salary, and this is it for my life. I've become the person that I saw as a youngster. I observed adults around me, and I said to myself, I hope that never happens to me, that I just become another working class person, getting married, having kids, and having to struggle to survive in the system. And I had become that. I was probably at that stage 20, turning 21, and I started reading more and more books about esoteric healing and stuff like that. And the more books I started reading, the more I realized that there might be more to life within spirituality, that I might be, even though I have to work in this physical reality to provide for myself, maybe there's a reason and a purpose for everything the way it is. And maybe the reason and the purpose is spiritual and is the unseen reality and has something to do with the afterlife, and that maybe I can tap into my happy self, which will be found within my spiritual dimension of myself, which currently I did not know how it worked and I did not see it. And therefore I started reading more and more books, and at that stage I had become a Wiccan and had been so for a few years. So I was already interested in the concept of, working with energy and advancing one's spiritual self and stuff like that. And as the years progressed and I was working day and night in this job and I didn't have a good salary, I started having more and more thoughts about maybe for me to get away from this, I have to get into where my true happiness will really be. And that should surely be with some kind of creator or a God, because surely that is where I'll feel content and peace and love. Because surely being paid this salary for the rest of my life does not do it for me. It's not going to cut it. So let me see if I can find the ultimate happiness. So I then, I was like really practicing my Wiccanism, and I was really serious about it. And I then started studying kinesiology, and I was going to really get into healing people. And my starting point in that was I wanted to heal myself, because I was so angry and frustrated with where I'd ended up, and that there was nothing in this life for anybody that was, if you didn't have money. And if you just ended up in another working class position, that was it for the rest of your life. You were condemned to survive in the system. And therefore I went deeper and deeper into then your esoteric healing modalities, because I thought that if I could learn how to heal and how to balance and how to align oneself, and with regards to one's metaphysical self and your energies and stuff like that, that I will become healed, and through that I can assist others, that I could heal my anger. And for many years, therefore, I went into all of these modalities, studied them, but I also deeply went into guides and working with guides and learning from my guides how to be a better, I had this one guide called Jack, which I have done videos about, and I spent day and night just communicating with him. If I didn't have work to do, I would just communicate with him, and he was asking him to teach me. And then the idea came to me that because of my commitment and because of the difficult life that I lived, and in the reading that I had done, the idea came to me that maybe I was God's disciple, because I'm living this difficult life and nothing works for me in the system, and I understand things about the world, and therefore I must be a special messenger from God here to help humanity get out of its struggling. So I even went headfirst into that whole mind-created illusion of I'm God's disciple and I have a message to give to humanity. So I was working with my guide, preparing myself to become this Messiah and this messenger, and day and night I would just focus on my spirituality, and I really truly believed, and each time I would read more and more about what was possible, I would try more and more things, and through that more and more ideas would come up of this grandness that I was, and that there was this God taking care of me, and that even though I was just living on the breadline and fearing survival the whole time, there was this God taking care of me, and I had a higher purpose, and that I was a being that was already thousands of years old, and I'd been created by God to come and save humanity, and that here I am now, and I'm having to live this difficult life so that I can understand the suffering of others. So I've walked that entire point, and I have also had to walk the self-honesty points of realizing that that was not real, that if you take all of that away and you get back to what really exists in this reality, and you take the layers of information in your mind that you stacked up due to reading that you call your spirituality, and you take that away and you diffuse that and you let it go, you realize you're still in this reality, you're still in the capitalist system, and you're still participating in the capitalist system, and you're still bound by it and determined by it. And then I realized God wasn't going to save us, some special higher consciousness and purpose wasn't going to save us, and that I'm here, therefore I came from that and am now able, in the position that I'm able to take responsibility for myself and everything I've allowed and everything I've created as the fabric of society, and therefore I am able to do something about this, so that people don't have to create layers in the mind, first of all, that they are some higher special purpose, or that there's a God, or there's a reason why we're allowing the suffering. If you take that away and you get back to reality, which is we're allowing this, and we're only allowing it because of capitalism, all the suffering and abuse in the world, and we're only allowing it, the pain and the suffering that people cause each other, because of what we've allowed as the fabric of society, then, which has become the mind of man, which then becomes the fabric of society. Once you realize that, you can actually get to a point of supporting and assisting yourself and others to also realize, look, I'm responsible for myself and what goes on in my mind and my secret thoughts and my secret desires, and then we can start working on the fabrics of the society and the layers that we've created around ideas of who we are, instead of actually getting back to living here in the physical equally for everybody. Isn't that what we all actually want, is to live a comfortable life without having to fear survival, without having to belong to a religion or a specific group or a specific culture to try and keep yourself safe and try and keep yourself from death? At the end, every single human just actually wants to not fear life. And through what we're doing currently is we're attaching religion and spiritual meaning to not have to fear life, when we're still in the same world system which causes us to have to survive every day. And that actually believing in something spiritual does not change the fact that you have to go to work every day, that you have to survive, that you have to pay your bills, that there are countless people and beings suffering within the capitalist system. It does not change any of that.
There is obviously within this also some that reason more, shall we say, with common sense. But as long as there is ego, there is this self-fabrication, where a person, remember, ego is a fabrication of oneself, where you have fabricated yourself into something you believe you are based on the feedback and experiences you had in your life, not realizing that your experiences were actually fabricated by your environment, your education, your family, and other people around you. So you did not really fabricate yourself. You are a fabrication of others. That makes it even more difficult. And even if you are reasonable and believe you're doing the right thing and you're doing good things, the world is proving that you are not really here free from your fabrications as ego. You are not questioning the world to the extent of bringing about, finding a way to bring about a world that will always work, infinitely so, for all beings, equally, virtually creating a world where there are only millionaires, which is what we're going to do with equal money. We're going to create a world of millionaires. Everybody dreams about it, so why not give it? Because that's the point of forgiveness. Forgiveness means we can stop, forgive ourselves for what we've created, start again, and make new rules. And if we decide everyone is millionaires, that means we'll be as well, then we just have to work out how do we do it. And that we have an answer for as well. But But the nice thing is, the fascinating thing is, the amazing thing is that your pursuit of happiness will be answered with equal money, because you will end up being in the position of the elite. Certainly, some of the moral issues that the elite so easily wash away with money will not exist. You're not going to be able to buy sex because all the prostitutes will have equal money. So they are not for sale anymore. You're going to have to become a gentleman, learn some sexual skills to get somewhere with sex, isn't it? You're not just going to be able to buy it. So enjoy it while it's lasting, because eventually you're not going to have the power that money gave one. You are going to have to become your own power, and that must be equal and not abusive. So we are in for a fascinating ride as we take apart the multi-fabricated reality and look at all the fabrications that has been kept in place and that is still used to entertain the human in an illusionary system, the system that do not sustain all, and where you end up mostly making decisions out of fear or survival, trying to protect your family, never considering the total consequence of a decision, how it impacts every living thing. So, a journey to become millionaires, a world of millionaires. Some say they're making it their object in this world to create 1,000 millionaires in 3 years. We are on a journey to create more than 6 billion millionaires within 20 years. Who can say that?